All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Tim Akes, and I wanted to welcome you to our event today. We're going to be talking about um, MPanel Production software. But hey, just for a moment, I wanted to wish everyone a happy Veterans Day. I know today Barbara mentioned that on the 11th day of November and the 11th hour is the armistice agreement. So that signified the end of World War I for the world. So that was a fantastic achievement. And as well today, I know at least in the U.S. is Veterans Day. So if there's any veterans, thank you for your service. We do appreciate that. So, all right. And just because it's Veterans Day, now this was a World War II thing, but certainly what we're going to be talking about today is MPanel production. And I know that a lot of people use this for boat covers, and because it's Veterans Day and with the military and everything, I thought I might just share a project that we used MPanel on, and it was a small boat. I'll go up here and get it, but basically this is the I'll minimize this. The USS Missouri, which is currently at anchor in Pearl Harbor. And I know that World War II ended on that boat, but because it's a military boat, I got to go to Hawaii, and here's a picture of me standing on the gun turret in Pearl Harbor. And that was a fantastic thing. Certainly she resides over the Arizona Memorial, protecting the memorial and watching over it. And here's a picture of the boat. There was a project about a couple years ago now, about 2 years ago, where they wanted to build a cover on the boat. And because MPanel Production is a product that a lot of you use to build boat covers, I thought I would share a little bit of the concepts. And we used MPanel for this project. We got to assist our customer Tropical Jays in Hawaii. And I'll make this a little bigger so we can all see it. And we were able to gain a 3D model of the ship and to be able to create this cover system, which protects the spot where World War II ended, where the Japanese empire surrendered to the United States or Allied forces on September 2nd, 1945. And on the deck of the ship is a plaque where the Japanese came on board and surrendered in order to create some shade for the people, folks who are visiting the memorial, especially if it's inclement weather, if there's rain. We assisted our client Tropical Jays in building this PVC cover tension structure that was over it. And certainly I've got this PDF. We're happy to share this with you all if you want to see it, but I'm just going to jump down and show you the end result. You know, here's the actual cover. Here it is on the ship itself. And here's a lot of people enjoying the shade that it provides during one of the tours. So I just thought, since it was Veterans Day, and since this, certainly I'll end with this photo here, that a lot of people, certainly we have a lot of people to thank. So any veteran who served, thank you very much. We appreciate your service. All right, let's talk about software. So Barbara from our team, Barbara Derrick, is also on this call, and she's going to run administration for me. So during this event, if you guys would like to, if you have any questions, chat to Barbara. You can send Barbara, you'll see Barbara Derrick on the list. You can send her a chat, and she'll be able to ask those questions. Or feel free. We've got a pretty good group in here today. I see quite a few on the list. So, but I don't think it's too many that if you have a question right away, feel free to unmute your mic and interrupt, and we can talk about it right then as well. So, All right, without further ado, let's talk about MPanel Production. So MPanel Production is an application that runs within Rhino, and I've got Rhino up right here. You guys can see my Rhino. I'm on Rhino 5 on this particular machine I'm on. We work in 5 and 6. We're currently testing on 7, so as soon as Rhino 7 comes out, we're going to be ready to go. We are registered developers with McNeil and Associates, so we get an advanced copy, and we make sure our software runs with every new copy. And then as you use our software, and if you keep your maintenance up to date, your FSS full support or UOS updates only, you'll automatically get the next versions that come out of our software. This version here is version 8. And so what I wanted to show you was we took our full MPanel Pro product, which you can see behind me here, this image here. This is MPanel Professional Pro. It's geared for really any kind of fabric structure, and certainly we have people that use it for marine projects or cover projects. However, it has a lot of things in it. It has tents and awnings and a lot of predefined templates that you might not need as a marine client or a cover client, maybe someone who's building covers for RVs or something like that. So what we did was, and it works in AutoCAD or Rhino, and it's a little more complex to use. I mean, it's a more robust product. So we took the engine out of that, the engine that does the form finding, and you can see this shape behind me right here. It's like a saddle shape. We took that engine out of MPanel Production or MPanel Pro, and we put it in MPanel Production, but we put it in this easy to use interface. It's a small toolbar. It basically works like a wizard. You almost start on the left here and work to the right. And so what this allows you to do is to apply this to your Rhino and really use it as a tool to help you design mostly marine, but it's used for marine, for some shade, for some awning, a lot of different projects. Okay, first of all, we got a couple of things here. Number one is it is a toolbar, and you'll see I'm moving it around. I've got an option here where I've got this thing called expand to show the options. So anytime I click on a button, the first click I do, like if I click right here on panel mesh, the first click gets me to the option screen. And that allows me to change the options, choose which options I want, maybe choose how many panels I want. And then the next time I click that button, it launches the program. It launches that application command. But if I'm on it already, the first time I click it will launch that. Now I've got an option right here, and I'm going to go to my settings, and I can say auto minimize toolbar on the settings. Now what that does is as I go out of the toolbar, it will cascade up and roll up. As I go back onto it, it cascades down. All right, for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to leave that off. I may manually roll it up and down a few times, but we'll talk about that. I just wanted to show you what's happening there. All right, so in MPanel Production 8, we've developed this to really try to help you guys out as much as we can. And so we've got something called the selection filter, and the very first two buttons here are our selection and our cleanup tools. And so we've got the selection filter, and then I've also got prepared data. And so what's going to happen here is we're going to use these tools to help with our cleanup and our wireframe building from our models before we start to mesh. Okay. The next set of buttons I have here are my meshing and paneling tools. And you see that I have add a mesh, I have adjust a mesh, and arrange meshes. And that's what these three buttons are right here. They will really be able to help control the mesh part. We're going to be talking about meshing as well. The next two buttons are my paneling tools, where I go from 3D shape to a flat 2D pattern. And I've got two options here. One is panel mesh, and the other one is panel cross sections. We're going to talk about both of these, and I'm going to show you how both of these work. The next set of buttons here, I really call these our production tools, because here's what we've got. We've got things like split panel. We've got arrange panels, and we'll talk about that. And this is our where we can spread the panels out. We've even got an optional nesting option here that we'll talk about here in just a moment. We've got our tool that's shrink settings, and the shrink works in two directions. It can either work as a positive shrink or a negative shrink. And a negative shrink will grow the panel. A positive shrink will shrink the panel. So if you're putting on a bimini top or something that needs to be stretched, something that needs tension on it, you're going to want to put in a positive shrink. So a positive number here, like 1, will shrink that panel by 1%. A negative number here will grow that panel. And for all of you know that build boat covers, you know if you try to build a boat cover that's exactly the same size as the boat, by the time you sew it and the fabric draws up, you're not going to get that boat cover on there. It's going to be really difficult for you. However, what we can do with this is by applying a negative shrink, which we'll do in just a moment, we actually get to grow that cover by a certain amount, usually about 1% is just about right for that. Okay. We've also got a tool for seam allowance and seam settings. We're going to talk about all that. I've got panel numbering and panel output. That's how we actually output the panels to a cutting table or a printer or some way to get you out so that you can cut your panels out and make that shape. Finally, our utility functions are down here. Now, this is one button, but we've got several different options, and here's how this works. Instead of having 4 different buttons, one for modify polylines, meshes, panels, we have one button, which is utilities, and then you can set the function. You can say, hey, I want to modify polylines, and I want to renumber those polylines. Or you can say, I want to modify meshes, and you can see I want to join those meshes together. You might join them together. So a lot of different options there on the utility functions. Finally, we have settings and our delete old objects. Let's talk about settings just for a moment. This is something you probably want to do at the very first of your project. So MPanel by default will work on a layer called MPanel, or you can type in your own layer. I could type in Tim's layer here, and it would work on that. Or if you already have predefined layers set up in your drawing, you can click this current layer button. And if you draw a mesh on layer fabric, when the panels get produced, they're going to be on layer fabric. It will keep the same layer. You know, it's whatever layer you're working in Rhino, it'll keep that. If you leave it by default, it's going to be drawn on a layer called MPanel. Okay. You can also filter certain things. I can filter by layer name. So I can click this on and I would only be selecting items that were drawn on layer MPanel, for example. So that's really a good feature as well, that you can use that to really control how that feature works. All right, so when we build a new object, we have a couple of different options. It's going to build either black or white, or it's going to choose the color of the layer that you're assigned to, or you can choose to preserve the color. So if I have a mesh that's blue, when I make the panels, those panels will be blue. If I have 2 or 3 meshes on there, one blue, green, and red, when I make those panels, they will keep the same color as their original mesh. It's a really good way to track your panels throughout your project. I'm going to leave it for black for now. Also in the old object color, it's going to turn things red. And we'll see that. We can also say don't change or delete, but we're going to leave that for now. All right. So let's go talk about the filter button for just a moment. So you can see on this particular drawing, I've got this little drawing here where I've got 2 bimini bars, and I've also got some points over here that I've recorded. Now, one thing about our software is we've built it to work with data collection devices. So if you're using either a Leica laser, like a 3D Disto, or even an S910, or you're using a ProLiner by Protum, if you're ProLining and you've ProLined like the bimini bar or a part of the boat, sometimes that may come out as dots, and sometimes that may come out as lines or partial lines. So one thing we can do is we can actually we've got this thing called the selection filter. And so I can click on points. I can select my whole drawing, click that button, and it's going to release everything that's not a point. Now we'll do that later on with a lot of objects, and it's a lot more impressive there. But I just wanted to show you how I can select. I don't have to come through and just pick every single point. you know, especially if there's a lot of meshes or something around them. Simply windowing the whole drawing, running the tool, I'll have all the points within my selection set. Now, here is something that, of course, Rhino has an option too called like SELPT. If I type those in, that would select all the points on the drawing. But let's say I just wanted a certain few, you know. Now, certainly I could select these, but let's, you know, but if I just wanted a certain few on one part of a drawing, I could run that and select that. All right. So once I have those points selected, I'm going to jump over to my prepared data tab, and I've got these tools right here. We're going to be using these two tools for a moment. I'm going to show you how that works. And I'm going to say join points to poly. I click on that. Instantly now, those points are all joined into a polyline. I can say delete old object. And so now I actually have a polyline object that I can work with just from those points. So as you're taking actual measurements with either a laser device or a ProLiner, if you use points, want to join those, we've got those. Okay. So I just want to show you how that works. Let's jump over to this object. And you can see what I've got here is I've got, this is a couple of different objects here. It's two different lines. And so I can select one of these lines and, or both of them. Let me select one first, and I can say convert curve to a poly. Now, that's just a Rhino curve right now. So even if I, you know, if I was in Rhino and built a any kind of shape in Rhino, if I click on that, Rhino says that's one curve added to the selection. So whether you're doing a straight line in Rhino or a curved object, it sees it as a curve. In this case right here, I've got an object that is, it's one polyline basically, but it sees it as, or a line, but it sees it as a curve. So Rhino likes to work, MPanel likes to work with polyline objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say number of nodes. Now I've left it set very small to 5. If I click on this, you can see what happened is, if I turn the points on, MPanel tried to fit a polyline with only 5 nodes on that shape, exact shape, and certainly 5 nodes is not anywhere near enough. Okay. So what I want to do here is I'm going to click this line again. I'm going to set this to a higher number, something like 49, and I'm going to run that tool. And what you're going to see now is when I hit delete, that now is a polyline object. So if I click on it, you can see that has 49 different points on it. Okay. All right, let's do that to both of these. Let's run this one as well. And I'll click. Now, and if I selected both of those at the same time, absolutely I can. I can select that one, hold my shift key down and select this one and say convert curve to polyline. And those will both convert and they'll stay separate. However, if I have 2 sides here and I want to convert both of those to a polyline, I can use this convert several curves to a poly. Okay. And what that's going to do, that's going to allow me to select many parts of it. If I have several different parts, click on this. Now I have a single polyline that was based off of those 2. All right. Now I want to show you a little something here. I'll just hit undo a couple times on my screen. And I'm going to get back to here. Here's my red lines. Let's get rid of those. I did one too many times. What I wanted to show you here was that in the case that we have this, if we have, I'm going to grab that curve point and I'm going to physically make a gap there. So I've got a gap in between that space. What I wanted to show you was when I go to make that, say, convert several curves into a poly, when I run that tool, here's what it does. It says there is a gap in between the polyline ends. It notices, it sees that that XY point is not exact where those meet. And I've got an option. I can say use an average point at the ends, fill the gap between the ends, or extend the polys to meet. And I'm just going to say fill that gap in between there. And so what that will do is that goes ahead and fills that up, fills that gap up in between those 2 points. Now, if I wanted to be exact, and I'm using 49 points on that, so it'll average that out just a little bit. I hit delete old objects. But you can see now I have one continuous polyline around that. All right, so I'm going to grab this one over here again, And I'm going to say convert that to a poly again, just because. So what I've done now is I want to show you that by, oh, I'm going to grab both of those, convert both to a poly, so that I now have both of these objects are a nice single smooth polyline. All right. Now, what I want to show you is this. While this one over here looks pretty smooth, doesn't look too bad, it's been measured. If you guys use the ProLiner device or even that laser, you'll know that when you try to measure a bimini top, and let me look at this from a top view real quick. I'll change my view so we can see this. And I don't know where my circle went. There it is. All right, if this is a cross section through the bimini top, what I wanted to show you was if you're measuring, you're trying to measure, you know, certainly if the fabric is on here, I'm just going to draw a simple line that shows maybe where the fabric, let me shut my snaps off for a minute. You know, my fabric's going to want to set right about, let me grab this. It's going to want to come in. You know, my fabric's going to want to wrap around here. But basically, the point I want to try to measure, you know, is basically about right here. However, if I have a laser or a ProLiner and I'm in the center of the boat, and let's say I'm measuring from this location right here, when I try to shoot a laser beam up to this, I can't shoot past the bar, the bimini bar, and I want to really measure that backside. So what I'm forced to do is measure here on the inside. Or a ProLiner, you're forced to measure here. Maybe you're measuring on the bottom of the boat, but you're basically, you know, 180 degrees away from where you want to measure where that fabric's going to sit. So, and as you measure that inside of that bar, what I wanted to show you is that you might not be super accurate. And if you take a look at this, here's what's happened. That bar looked okay, but as I'm using, maybe a ProLiner has something called the sketch or trace command. And as I'm tracing, maybe my hand shakes a little bit and that bar gets a little bit jagged on there. Okay. And you can see from a straight down view, I'm not planar on this. Certainly it you know, if my bimini bar is here, maybe it waved as it was going across the bar. So we have some tools over here called smooth polys. Now, what I can do is I can say fit a smooth poly to this. Okay. Now, if I set this very low, like 4, when I select that polyline and run the tool, again, just like we did before, if I don't have enough number of smoothing points, then it's going to try to fit a polyline in there, but that's not enough. And so certainly that does not work for us. But if I come in here and put like 14 smoothing points on here and run that same tool, what you'll notice is this. MPanel will take all of those points that you've done and it tries to average those out. So where that would wave back and, you know, go back and forth a little bit, it tries to follow your scan and what you've intended here, but it will average those out and try to smooth that polyline out. Okay. Now, the one thing about this is though, if I look at this from this view, from a side view, it gets closer to exactly, you know, like a flat object, but still, there's still some waviness in it because of how it built on the line. However, if I select that same one again and run fit smooth planar curve to it, then when I fit a smooth planar curve, what that does, that assumes that that is completely flat. If I were to lay that bimini down on a concrete floor, it would lay completely flat. So although it'll try to match the shape that I have here, and it's a little exaggerated there, it tries to match that shape as far as a cleanup. It will be a completely flat object and flat shape on there. Okay. Now there's one other option on here. Remember I talked about where the fabric goes? Let's say, for instance, this was a 1 inch, and if I look at the top of this again, let's say these are a 1 inch tube. So I'm just going to grab this and turn my control points on again. And I'm going to make this, this diameter 1 inch. And let me move this tube from the quadrant over here. So basically, and this might not be exact, but what I wanted to show you was we're measuring the inside of the tube here. I'm going to say extrude a long curve, and I'm going to select that. So when I turn to a rendered view, and there's some clouds, we'll go to a shaded view. You'll see that basically what I'm trying to measure is the inside of the tube. Where I really want to be is on the outside of that tube. And I just did this and it flattened out, but I did this quick illustration to show you that I've measured the inside because maybe the fabric was on. I want to actually get the outside of the tube. Well, no problem, because what MPanel can do is we can actually take and add an offset to this. So I can say curve offset 1 inch. I'll select that item using the planer and still run this. And so what it automatically does, it applies a 1 inch differential, and it's in the direction of my tube. So it's basically going to be 180 degrees off where you scan. So what if I recorded the inside of the tube, my new line is now 1 inch, 1 inch off 180 degrees from that. So what this is going to allow you to do is, I'll grab both of these and I'll run that tool. I'll hit delete old objects. So now my fabric, actually, you know what I want to leave? I'm going to get those back because Control Z, Control Z. I want to show you this is that I can now go to my add a mesh tool. I'm going to add a mesh between 2, 3, or 4 edges. I'm going to click the tool. I'm going to say that outer bimini right there is my first one. I don't have a line down here, so I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard. I'm going to choose that outer bimini and enter again. And instantly then my bimini mesh is built on. Now, it's not ready to go yet. I've still got some things to do to it, but I just wanted to show you how very easily now we've actually recorded where the bimini top is actually going to be just by using those cleanup tools. So between the modify polys, which we've got all the convert to a poly, I've got things like join poly, split poly, extend to meet, and offset that poly line as well. I can do that, or I can smooth them. I can interpolate maybe a rough scan and actually get exactly what I want. All right, let's talk about another project right now. Staying on the bimini top thing, let's go. I'm going to open up a project. I'm not going to save that one, and let's go get. Let's see. Let's go get a bimini top example, file 1. Let's see. All right, so here's a bimini top again, and this one here we've cleaned up a little bit. This one's gone through the stages we just talked about. We've cleaned it up, and we have 3 bars. We have a front bar here, we have the back bar or middle bar, and then the back bar. And I've also broken it up into, I've added a couple of joint lines right here. And what I want to do is I want to put this into some sections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, I'm going to go to, now that I've done my cleanup, we're going to jump over to add meshes. And on the meshes, what we're going to be able to see here is I've got add mesh between 2 or 3 or 4 edges, add mesh between intersecting curves, add mesh between poly edges, or add mesh between 4 edges through the surface poly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on add meshes. Now I've set my mesh edge here to 25 by 25. You don't want to do too much. I see a lot of people come in and they'll set it at 99 points, you know, where, and just to illustrate this again, if you set it to 5, and if I click on add a mesh, and if I say bottom, right, top, and left, certainly 5 is not enough definition to get that shape. It's just not. But also, 95, and if I run that tool, 95, yeah, it accurately captures the shape, but I've got so many points on here. And what happens is this: if I turn my control points on, you'll see how I all of these points on here. So I've got 95 points by 95 points. That's points on this one mesh right here. And so what MPanel does is when I use the tool, we're going to talk about something in a moment called tension mesh. It takes each of these points individually. And what it will do is it will bounce them up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down 500 times until it finds its resting spot and its form. Again, if you look at this image behind me here, you see the saddle shape. You can actually see the shape that this takes. That's called form finding. Our software does that, and it does that by bouncing this mesh up and down. It's sort of like a trampoline. If any of you have kids or you guys have all probably been on a trampoline, if you take your hand and hit the trampoline will cavitate. It'll bounce up and down, getting smaller and smaller bounces until it finds its resting spot. That's the same thing that happens here. But if we have 10,000 points here, 10,000, 10,000, that's 40,000 points that MPanel has to bounce up and down 500 times each. So it's just a lot of points. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we get a good number. About 25 is a good number. That gives me 25 lines in the one direction, X direction, and 25 in the warp direction. I'm going to go ahead and add the mesh, click bottom, right, and this is what the software is asking me for. It's asking me for the bottom edge, the right edge, the top, and the left edge. And so what it'll do is it automatically enters that information in, and it'll put the mesh on that. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue that and say bottom, right, top, and left. And here it's saying I see two things. I see the curve and the mesh. Which one do you want? I want to select the curve, and it'll put that in. Now, on the opposite side, the best practice is to turn your model around, grab the add mesh again, bottom, right, top, and left. And again, bottom, working counterclockwise, right, top, and left side. Okay, now what that's done is this. I'm going to select all four of these. Let me make a copy over here. I'm going to go to our utility tools to modify meshes and color mark meshes. I'm going to select those meshes and run that tool, deleting my old object. Here's what a proper model should look like. I have all the bottoms on the outside of my mesh. Blue is bottom. You can see that. Blue is bottom, yellow is top. My tops meet right up here on the top. And then my left and rights. It goes left to right, left to right. This one, left to right, left to right. So this model is what you want to see. If you're working on a boat cover or a boat model, I typically try to work from the bottom down, working on the bottom and working up. We'll look at that in just a moment. But I wanted to show you the way you build the model is important, because when I go to put seam allowance on, I need to know, I'm going to have a pocket back here on this bar and on this bar. So I need to know that's my bottom edge, so that when I go to put seam allowance on and when I tell it I want a pocket on the bottom, that it goes in the right spot. I don't have a bottom here and then a bottom here and a bottom over here or a bottom here. And my seam allowance gets all messed up. So I want to make sure that I have that in the right configuration in the right spot. Now, just a couple of things about pulling meshes together, and I'll just talk about this, is typically what we'd have to do is if you have some areas that meshes need to go in, typically what we used to have to do is I would have to select these lines right here, and I'd have to use the break command, and I have to break it here and here, so that we break these objects up into individual pieces, and then these would be broken up. Well, with some of the new features like this one right here, you can see that's not broken right there, but I can say between intersecting curves, and as I go in to put a line in now and say bottom, right, top, and left, it will still find that. Even if those curves intersect, even in 3D, and you can see my camera view, they have to touch. If there's a distance in between them, we have an edge tolerance here. You got to be with basically 1/8 of an inch. So if you've got two lines that are very far apart, no, we can't use this tool for that. But this tool right here lets you put meshes into areas that you have not actually, maybe you had to snap and break up. You can see how this line here was not split, but it found the edge just fine. And one other option I think it's very worth pointing out is if you have a shape, and let me just draw a shape very quickly for you. And then maybe just a line over here. All right, by using add mesh between 2, 3, or 4 edges, if I click this and if I say bottom, right, top, and left. So what happens is you'll see it fills in very nicely and it comes up out here and it fills in the curve very nicely. However, down here where I've got a point, I wanted to show you this, is that it tries its best. That was an object with a sharp bend or a sharp curve on it. It tries its best to fit that curve in there, to fit that shape in, but the mesh just can't, because it gives it equal lines along, divides that line up 25 times and puts the mesh on. It's missing that very bottom curve right there. So the question is, how do I make that shape work? Well, certainly one thing I can do is I'm going to click on that and explode that shape where I have that now as 2 points. Okay. I'm going to now go back to my prepare data and I'm going to say convert curves to a poly. I'm going to say, and I'm going to convert 2 curves to a poly or several curves to a poly. I'm going to change that. Let's put in 25 points. I'm going to select both of those lines and run that tool. Okay, delete the old object. That now is a polyline with 25 points on it. All right. Now on these, I don't want them to join together. So I'm going to say convert curve to poly, select all 3 of these, run that tool. Those are not polylines, but they're individual points. Okay. Back on my add mesh, I'm going to say add mesh between 2, 3, or 4 poly edges. Notice all of my selection down here is grayed out because what's going to happen, it will take the polyline nodes and use those as the mesh points, and it applies that mesh so it goes directly down to that point. So we get complete full coverage of that mesh object. Okay. I can select that now, and that actually will create a proper template for any kind of sharp curve or bend like that. So by simply taking a moment and converting that to a polyline and then allowing that to use the polyline to define the mesh, defines those sharp curves. All right. These are some of the new features we've put into our software, especially for version 8. And I've got a few more things like the corners. We can even make a mesh from a Rhino surface. And or you can make a mesh from a Rhino surface to 3, 4 edges. So even if you have a Rhino surface, our software will convert that into a usable mesh for MPanel. So, all right. And Barbara, I'll just break for a second. Any questions come in yet, or no?
No questions yet.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, guys, be sure to chat Barbara if you guys have any questions. She's running our administration today, and it's Barbara Derrick, and she's on the list there. You should be able to send her a private chat, and Barbara will ask me the question. Or if you need to, feel free to break in. All right. So continuing on, what we've got right here I want to show you is this. We've got this shape right here, but it's almost like a piece of sheet metal has been over. We haven't given it any kind of form yet. So what I want to do is I want to go to the next tool here, which is called adjust meshes. Now, if I have this setting at a 1, which it is by default, here's what a setting of 1 means. This mesh is made up of lines in the X direction and the Y direction. And a setting of 1 means that it's going to pull equally in both of those dimensions, both the X and the Y. It's going to pull an equal amount of tension. However, in this situation, we only really have tension between our bimini bars. There's very little bit across, but there's more in the warp direction of the fabric, or the top to the bottom direction. So if I change this, I'm always changing the weft. The left to right tension is what I'm changing here. So by coming in and putting in a 0.1, what that allows me to do is that allows me to select all of these meshes and to say, I want 90% of the tension top to bottom and only 10% across. I'm going to run the tool. And what I want to show you what happens here, it's going to run through, it's going to do that bouncing. And here you see the old shape is in red, the new shape is in black, and you can see the difference there. Look what happened. It actually gives it that hollow, that shaping. I'm going to hit delete old objects. And just so we can see this, let's go in and render this. And again, I've got my clouds in the background from a previous rendering. So it looks like a great day out on the lake. All right. Hey, one last thing. While we're talking about renderings, I know this will be helpful to you guys. If you guys want to show your customer what this looks like, you might have a picture of their boat and you might align this in 3D. You might use the picture of their boat as the background. You can align this cover in 3D, go to rendering tools, and I'm going to select all my meshes. And I'm going to click on this button right here. It says set render color. And what that allows me to do, that allows me to choose what color that renders as and shows as. And so when you create a rendering now, if I was to actually create, let me just create a real quick rendering, hit the render button. It's going to take just a minute. And there's the rendering of this. And you can set that up where the background is in there as well. But this allows you to show your client a really good picture, and you might have several different color choices for them as well. So being able to do that, then I'm going to go back to wireframe here, and we're back to the model. So using that same model, it's all about using the model as many times as you can. And certainly we're going to do that right now. I'm going to go to a top view. I'm going to click on this model, and here's what I've got. I've got my 4 meshes there. But I've also, if you'll see recording in here, I've got these points. Now, kind of hard for me to go through and select these points because of the curve and everything. Man, I wish I had a tool. Oh, I do. It's called selection filter. I grab the whole model, click it on points, click the button, and there's those points selected. Okay. Now I can easily just click my meshes, and I'll make a copy of that right down here. All right, once I've got my 3D model up here, I don't want to destroy that. So I make a copy of just the meshes and the points. I also don't need the lines anymore. Okay, I'm going to go over here to this tool called, and I guess I just wanted to point out, I guess, before I step off, we did tension mesh here. I also have something called inflate mesh, great for cushions, upholstery. If you guys do marine fabric, this is where you can actually, and I'm just going to do a very quick illustration here for you. If I have a flat mesh, and that's flat right there, I click on that, I go to inflate mesh, and I run that tool. And what that does is, you'll see that allows me to inflate the mesh. It's almost like I took some batting or stuffing and put it in there. So if you guys want to do batting or quilting on your upholstery, that's a way you can create it and use that inflate mesh to actually apply an inflation pressure under the mesh and lift it up. As well, same thing, if I have a shade sail structure, by very quickly, you know, maybe that's my 4 points and I've copied the 4 poles. I can select this, go to cable mesh and run that tool, and that'll actually create my shade sail structure. I know a lot of you guys are building shade structures on T-tops and off of enclosures. T-tops or radar arrays. You're building these shade structures, and the cable edge mesh will allow you to relax that in a cable structure as well. So, all right. Again, here's what I'm going to do. I've got my copy right here. Now, when MPanel does patterning, it always looks straight down from the top. And a lot of times, if you've got a boat, and if you see my camera view right now, the hull, you may have some meshes that go around the bottom of the hull. And certainly if you don't go from the top view, what's going to happen is maybe it might pattern my hand this way where it was supposed to be this way. So you might get the palm of the hand as the pattern instead of the outside face. MPanel has a new tool now called Arrange Meshes. If I select these meshes and run this, what it does is it's automatically from a front view, and this is best seen from a front view, it's going to gull wing that out. And it looks like I copied down. So let me move these back up. So I'm about on the 0 plane. Oh, it did put them on the 0 plane. Sorry. So what that did, that gull winged this out, as well as what it did was it also does this. If I say delete old object, it takes the points, any points that were on a mesh, and shares them on both sides. So if I want to use those as a reference point now, maybe that's where I'm going to have a reinforcement strap, or maybe I've got a center pocket there. It shares that one point if it's on the edge of the mesh, shared it 4 here and 2 there, but that's where it actually will share those out. All right, let's go back to a top view now. And so I've arranged as meshes. Let's make a copy of those down. And I'm going to go ahead and select all of those at the same time. Now, here's something about our patterning, and I'll talk about this. I'm going to make a couple copies up here. MPanel has an option where we can select this and go to our panel of complete mesh, panel mesh tool. I'm going to say convert mesh into panels, number of panels 1. I select that. I run the tool. Now I get a drawing failure there. It still went ahead and did it. Oh, my points. I think the points up there, it was seeing those. It's marking those points right on the edge. So it goes ahead and does that and puts that. Let me go ahead and I'm going to click ungroup here and ungroup here. Let me grab this one here now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that now one panel might be great, but I might want to come in and say, I want this 3 panels. I'm going to select this. I'm going to run the tool, and MPanel will create this from the bottom to the top, automatically create those 3 panels for me. Okay. Or if I want, I can say across the mesh, and across the mesh, run this, and it'll create the 3 panels in the opposite direction. Okay. Now, one thing I can do is, I want to show you this, is that I actually have options as well. Let me ungroup that. Ungroup it. All right. I've got an option here where I can simply draw lines in. I can draw this line from here across. And let me offset this like 1 inch. I'll make some offsets here, and then I'll use this to copy. And all I'm doing is making some offsets here. I'm going to copy these. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put this one right here. I'm going to put this one over here. So I'm physically choosing where I want these lines. And I'm not going to make them all equal. I'm going to put them about like that. And what I want to do here is I want to make sure this one goes right through that corner right there. And so from a top view, I'm going to come over here to make cross sections. This is panel from cross sections. First, I'm going to make cross sections, and I'm going to say I want 21 lines, and let's put like 10 lines in between each one of these. I'm going to select everything. What I want you to notice is that these lines don't have to be drawn on the mesh. They're below it. But with this tool, what that allows me to do is, as I go back to a top view here, I've run the tool. It actually creates major lines where I put these. Now, I'd want to be very careful and like make sure I grab my corner. But if I hit delete old objects, what that does is that gives me lines based on those cross-section lines. And these might be different colors. You know, maybe I'll come in and grab these lines right here. I'll say make a panel from those lines and make that, there's that panel. I'll grab the last red line and all the way up to the next black line, make that as a panel. The last red line and grab the black line there all the way over to the red line, make that a panel, and so on. And so you guys can see how you can really start to develop some very custom, and the last red line, and make a panel. You know, so maybe just delete those lines. But you see how the paneling capability of MPanel Production and MPanel software is really powerful. You know, you may want that, and that to be set it as green, and you may want these 2 lines here to be printed out of blue fabric. So the options here are really powerful about how to do that. So, all right, I just wanted to talk about our patterning tools for a second. Let's get back on track. I know we're getting short on time here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all 4 of these. I'm going to say panel from a mesh. I'm going to say convert them into panels. I'm going to use the points as panel marks. And I am going to make one panel out of each one. And I'm going to run the tool. All right. So here's what I have is I have 4 panels now. And I will make a copy of those on down to here. And what you're going to see is we have the panels. And I have those points. And I said, use those as panel marks. And what you're going to see is, remember those little points? Those show up as this orange X. That's going to be real important in a couple steps here. Number one step I'm going to do now is going to go in here to my shrink tools. Let's say this is going to be made out of Sunbrella. I'm going to say my shrink in the X direction, which is across, is going to be 0.35%. But in the bar-to-bar dimension, 0.5%, a 0.5%. I'm going to select those, and that's a positive number. There's no negative. I'm going to run that tool, and what you'll see is you'll see that actually dimension aligned, let me make that, it'll about 0.08 or 685. So it doesn't reduce it much. It's less than 1%, but it absolutely shrinks those panels so that they account for the stretch that any particular fabric you're going to have. And we've got a number of fabrics, but you could also test your own. But now these panels are pre-shrunk, and so they are ready to be stretched on that Bimini frame. Let's go to the seam allowance tool, and here's what we're looking at. Remember, we had our bottoms or the outside edges. So the bottom, I'm going to say I want that to be a 6-inch pocket, and I've got normal and mirror. I'm going to set that to a mirror style. Now, the left and the top here. So I'm going to go to left, 0.2, or let's make it a 1/2 inch, 0.5, 1/2 inch. And on the left, because I didn't have any points on here, I'm going to say I want 5 marks. On the right side over here, that's just going to be a binding edge, 0 with 0 marks. My top edge here is going to be a 1/2 inch. And it's going to be the marks, I'm going to leave at 0. But I want you to remember that little orange dot we got right there. Okay. So that condition is good for this panel and this panel because it's the mirror of it. And I'm going to run the tool. What MPanel is going to do, here's the 6 inches down here. Here's my 1/2 inch with 5 alignment marks up the left edge. Up the top, I said no alignment marks, but you remember those little points? It'll give me an alignment mark right there on those points. Okay. Now for these opposite two, all I really have to do is this. My right edge is a 1/2 inch with 5 marks. My left edge is 0 with 0 marks. Top and bottom stay the same. Run the tool. Here's my panels. So I have a full set of panels now that have seam allowance on them, that have alignment marks. They all have a 1/2 inch down the center seams, and I've got a 6-inch pocket on the outside. Okay, let's copy that down. Let's go to one of our last tools here, which is our panel numbering. And so what I'm going to do here is real quickly, how we doing on time? We got a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and say I can stamp them either in the seam, which would put it right inside the seam, in a panel, or in the tag. I'm going to say in a tag outside the seam. I'm going to say I want the text height to be, let's put it in at maybe 1 inch. And I'm going to say start with the panel and start with panel number 1. I'll select all of them at the same time, run the tool. And what MPanel does is it will put in a cutoff tag. I really like that versus printing it right on the pattern. So you might not want to print it on the panel itself so that you don't get ink smeared on the gel coat, or, especially if you're on a cover. As well, what I can do is I can select all these and say draw assembly lines and run that tool, and MPanel will give me a marker that then I can say add assembly marks. And by selecting all of these, and the assembly marks are going to be, let's make them 1/4 inch tall, and run the tool, delete the old. And so what I'll have is I'll have panel match line 15 to 16 goes to match line 15 to 16. So as my sewers are sewing these together, not only do the alignment marks match up, but they also have a visual indicator as a printed on piece of text of how that goes together. All right, for a final thing, we need to put this out. So let's come in here and let's say that's our piece of fabric. I'm going to say that's 60 inches. I could draw it exactly 60, I guess. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our arrange panels tool. Certainly I can say spread them apart horizontally, which I'll just do that real quickly. I can grab them all and say spread them vertically or apart, but I'll say vertically. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use our optional nesting feature. And I'm going to say nest panels. Now we offer this as an option because you might want it. Your cutting table software might already have it, so we don't it's not a mandatory thing, but you can order this as an option if you want. I'll select all the panels and the fabric, and under my nest settings, I'm going to say have a warp angle limit of 0 degrees, or I could actually allow it to go to 5 degrees to allow the panels to rotate, but I want them all in the same orientation. And I'm going to go ahead and run the tool. And what it's going to do, it's going to go ahead and real quickly nest the panels in, and notice that they're all in the same grain direction as well. So that as these get cut out, I don't have sheen issues with one panel in one direction. If this panel was turned 90 degrees, my stretch would be wrong and my sheen of the fabric might be wrong. So by giving it a warp angle limit, it allows that warp line to rotate maximum of 5 degrees. I could tell it 15 degrees if I want, and maybe try to fit them in just a little bit closer. Let's grab them and do one more nest, and I'll hit delete all objects. So maybe I moved it in just a little bit and saved myself a couple inches of fabric. Finally, our output feature, I can select everything and run the output. I normally would output to a DXF file. However, I'm going to output to this drawing so we can see it. Cut's going to be red. Pin me is going to be blue. And I've even got inner hole down here. And I'm going to say I want the font to be just a single line font. I'll select that tool, click delete old objects, and here we can see everything in red would be cut. Everything in blue would be pinned on. Maybe the magenta line is just a reference line, but you can see my match mark lines and my match text is all blue. So this right now is a DXF file that I'm ready to go out to my cutting table. So that, in a nutshell, guys, is MPanel Production. There's a few other tools and things we can do with panels and polylines. We can add some windows. We've got some cut lines. If you're drawing enclosures, we can now include the window in an enclosure and give you a panel for both the glass and the enclosure itself. So a lot of nice tools. So with that, Barbara, I'll open it up for any questions if there's any.
Tim, Brendan would like to know if MPanel has a database of stretch properties of different fabrics.
So, we talked about that yesterday in our meeting with MPanel Pro. And although here's what the fabric companies are ultimately responsible for giving us the stretch factors, and some have done that. We are happy to share the ones we know, and we've discussed putting together a spreadsheet or a PDF form of the ones we know. But here's, what you're going to have to do is we don't have a database where you can choose the fabric. You must, you can, if you find the fabric stretch factors, and we'll give you everyone we know, like this I used right here, is what many of our customers use for Sunbrella, and they're very, very successful with this amount for Sunbrella fabrics. Shade cloth. If you're doing a shade sale, it's going to be something more like 3 and 1%. So those fabrics vary. We're going to look at putting those together, what we know, and offering those to you guys, to our customers for help. So, but for right now, there's not a database you can choose from. Okay. Any other questions on that, or questions, Barbara?
I don't have any other questions come in.
Really? Out of that group? Wow.
You must have done a really good job.
I guess so. Hey, I see Zach in here. I know Zach had a question. I know he did. Maybe Zach's on mute, so.
Maybe so. Maybe so. And of course, Tim, if anyone has any questions, they can go to our booth, or they can just send us an email. I've just put in a link to everyone that will take them straight to our booth at the IFAI Expo, the virtual one. So if you go there, leave us a business card, with all your contact information, then we'll be happy to get back to you.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, guys. Yeah, I'll be over at the booth if anyone wants to have a conversation with me, or if you guys have any questions later on, stop by the MPanel. You can go to the exhibits, just do the search. We're in Classic Hall number 2, and it's MPanel Software Solutions. Again, I'm Tim Akes, the representative for MPanel in the Americas, and I look forward to speaking to you all, or answering questions, or talking about the software, and hopefully having you guys start to use it.
And Tim, we also have an open question and answer session tomorrow from 12 to 3 that anyone on any of our products can come in and ask us questions, and we'll try to answer them for you.
Yep, we do. Yep, I'm on, and I will be there 12 to 1 is my time slot. Certainly you can ask any of us, but we've got myself, Andrew, Alan, several people from our organization are taking time slots. So 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm there 12 to 1, and we can answer questions on any of our products that you have. So,
okay. Thanks.
All
Thanks
right.
for attending, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Again, happy Veterans Day. If there's any veterans, thank you very much. We do appreciate your service. And okay, have a good day, everyone.